Welcome to the webinar, 7 Fatal Flaws in Mentoring Programs and How to Avoid Them. I'm Anne Rolfe of Mentoring Works. I'm presenting this webinar on behalf of the Saskatchewan Polytechnic, who are hosting a conference on mentoring in the very near future. So welcome to the webinar. I have 3 questions for you. Can you point to results of mentoring that impact on your organisation's bottom line? Are the majority of mentoring relationships producing the desired outcomes? Will your program be allocated additional resources in the next round of funding because it is a high-value business strategy? If not, the mentoring program's longevity may be limited. A successful mentoring program that doesn't achieve its full potential is a concern, but a failed mentoring program, or one that fizzles out, leaves staff cynical and management contemptuous of human resource strategies. But imagine what it would be like if your mentoring program were the benchmark for other industries, or other organisations looked at what you had done as a model. If you can avoid the 7 fatal flaws, they will. I've identified the 7 fatal flaws as a result of 2 decades specialising in mentoring. I have a background in adult learning and career development, and I've set up mentoring programs in fields as diverse as health, construction, energy, communication, education, law, and government. So I want to overview the 7 fatal flaws for you, and then I'll go into each one of them in more detail. So here are the 7 fatal flaws in mentoring programs. These are the most common mistakes I see, and I see them often. So if your mentoring program is a victim of any of these, you are not alone. Number 1, unclear strategic value, not clearly linked to corporate objectives. The second fatal flaw is insufficient lead time and planning. The third one is under-resourcing, budget, people, and mentoring collateral. The fourth fatal flaw of mentoring programs that I so often see is inadequate support. So a lack of activities, events, and information, and a lack of support from the top and middle layers of management. The fifth one is not enough training, so not training the participants in your program. The sixth fatal flaw is lack of structure and follow-up, so there's no program of contact and follow-up for the participants. And finally, ineffective monitoring, feedback, and evaluation. So if any of these are striking alarm bells for you, you suspect or know that they apply to your program now, or they may be a concern in a program you're planning, then just go ahead and jot down the number of the one, or perhaps there's more than one, that you recognise could be a difficulty for you, and you can take extra note as I go through each one of these. So let's go through each one of these in more depth. And what I want to do is actually turn these 7 fatal flaws around now into 7 steps for success. So in the live webinar, I actually paused for questions as we went through, but due to technical difficulties, I've had to re-record this webinar. So you may have to email questions or contact my friends at Saskatchewan Polytechnic if you'd like to follow up on any of these points. So the first fatal flaw that I want to turn around into an action step for success is the unclear strategic value. So the answer to that is really to build a business case for mentoring. And although I come mainly from a corporate world where the idea of a business case is fundamental to any project, this applies if you're in a not-for-profit, if you're in an academic setting, or no matter where you might be developing your mentoring program, you still need to build the business case for mentoring or the equivalent documentation and process that lists the benefits. So we know that mentoring delivers strategic value for organisations as well as personal benefits for the individuals. And without documented clear reasons for a program stated in terms that are meaningful for your stakeholders, you may find it hard to gain support for mentoring. It could be difficult to get people to engage in mentoring and challenging to make it a priority use of resources. So you need a business case that will demonstrate the viability of your mentoring strategy and justify the use of resources or funding and help gain buy-in from management and stakeholders. And a starting point for that is to brainstorm the reasons why you think mentoring in the organisation is necessary and why the people need a mentoring program. So in the live webinar, we actually started to brainstorm some of those reasons. So I suggest that what you need to do is talk to some of the people you're working with on your mentoring program and actually sit down and brainstorm some of the reasons you think mentoring is going to be necessary to your organisation and useful and helpful to the people you think are going to be involved. Once you've got a list of potential reasons for mentoring, you then need to go ahead and specify objectives in a more strategic way so that you can make your business case. So having kind of had a consideration of why mentoring is important to you, we take it to a more structured process. So this is a model that is available for you on my website and should be available where you're watching this recording to download and actually use. So what you do is take your list of potential reasons for mentoring and specify objectives in that more strategic way so that you can make your business case. And we do that by starting to look at high-level aims. You need to identify what the needs of your organisation are. What are its goals? What are its pain points? What problems does it need to solve? And then you can start to look at how mentoring can add strategic value. Now, I don't care whether you're a for-profit organisation, a not-for-profit organisation, an academic institution, a community organisation, no matter what type of body you are, there is a need that mentoring must satisfy and strategic value that mentoring can add. And in order to create a business case, you need to identify and address those organisational needs and the strategic value that mentoring adds in order to make that business case. Once you've done this, you can start to then focus on the target group. And I know a lot of organisations and a lot of mentoring plans actually start from this point, and that's perfectly fine. If you've started there, great. Continue there, but do also work backwards. In fact, I sometimes refer to this as kind of reverse engineering. So if you've already got your focus, your target group, and the purpose of your mentoring program, you still need to go back and look at those high-level aims in order to make your business case. And then you can go through, once you've got your target group and the purpose, and in actual fact, when I've been consulting and working with some organisations, or when I run planning workshops with people who are actually in the process of planning a mentoring program, when we go through this process, we sometimes have to go back and take another look. I've had situations where the target group that has originally been identified turns out not to be the target group that we need to actually work with for mentoring. Or perhaps it is the target group, but we need to realign our purpose when we really do a needs analysis about what that group needs and tie that in with where the organisation is going and how mentoring can be of assistance. So I have got some case studies on this. If you are interested, just drop me a line and I can send that to you. So once we've got the aims and the focus sorted out, then we can go ahead and actually specify our objectives. which is really important, as you'll see as we go through. So we specify objectives by looking at what are the outcomes we want to achieve with mentoring, and importantly, how could we measure those? So again, this diagram is available. It's a model that I've developed over 20 years of working in mentoring programs, and you can download that to work with the planning for your mentoring. So the second fatal flaw was insufficient lead time, and the step to success that counters that is actually to set aside the time and do your planning and preparation in a very thorough way. And another model that is quite comprehensive, so don't try and write this down now. Depending on how big your screen is, you may not even be able to read it that well, but it is available for you to download, probably where you're watching this recording, or if not, certainly on my website. So this is a model I call Mentoring Strategies, the 4P method. And the 4 Ps stand for plan mentoring, promote mentoring, prepare your participants, and provide a program of support once the program gets underway. And so in your planning process, you need to work through all 4 of these Ps in order to come up with a comprehensive plan. So let's have a look at the more detail. So I'm not going to read through all of this detail here. I'll leave you to download the handout and take your time to read through the detail, but you can see the first 2 of the items on the list under plan mentoring relate to what I've already spoken about. The first is identify strategic objectives, and the second is to analyse the needs of your target groups. And as part of that, you would normally engage your stakeholders. You also need a plan to promote mentoring, so a two-way communication that allows you to attract and engage participants and keep your managers on board and supportive. You then need to prepare participants, and that includes the selection and matching of participants, giving them plenty of information so they can make an informed decision about getting involved. And of course, you need to train and equip them to succeed. And then a program of support, a structured follow-up program that keeps people engaged. So I want you to start to think about now, and maybe for the first time, or maybe you have some experience in this area, and I want you to think about all of this process needs to be thought through. You probably need to consult other people. You might have a working group or a committee that's helping you. You certainly need to go out to your prospective participants and talk to them. You've got a lot of material and collateral to prepare, information that needs to go out. You need a lead time for attracting, selecting and matching your participants. I'd like you to really give some thought to how long this process would take. How long do you think it would take you from, if you were starting today, at what point would you actually have your participants matched up and meeting and ready to go? Just reflect on that for a moment and write it down for yourself. And again, in the live webinar, I ran a poll at this point and gave people some options to choose from. And it was something like, 4 to 6 weeks, 3 to 6 months, 6 or 12 months, less or more. So have a think about that. And there isn't a right or wrong period to nominate, but I do want you to realise that this is not something you can do overnight. You probably can do it in 3 months or less, but if you were to try to do it in 3 months or less, you would certainly need a lot of resources to throw at that in terms of people power. You need people to really think this through. You need information. You need material that's going to go out to your potential participants and so on and so forth. A normal, perhaps I shouldn't say normal, but the most likely scenario is 3 to 6 months, and even that can be a bit ambitious. People who say 12 months are probably giving themselves comfortable period of time. But of course, we don't always have the luxury of time. So just know you can do it in 3 to 6 months. You can even do it in less than 3 months. But if you choose a shorter time frame, you're going to need to have a lot of people or a lot of time for one person or two persons or just a small group to really get on and do this. So the best way to start, I believe, is with a planning workshop where you and a group of stakeholders, and by stakeholders I mean the decision makers, people who will be directly involved, people who might be indirectly involved, and I would suggest a sample group, at least a couple of people who are your target group of people who will be mentored and who will do the mentoring. Get them together and work through this model to do your planning. Come up with a realistic pre-launch timeline and brainstorm everything that has to happen before you launch and before you actually get mentoring pairs together for the first time. So the third fatal flaw is under-resourcing. And I've kind of started to touch on that, I guess. Under-resourcing the mentoring program. And I can't tell you how many people I talk to have been tasked with setting up mentoring but have not been allocated budget, people to do the work, all the time. Often it's dumped on them on top of their regular job, and they're supposed to somehow fit it in. And I might be hearing some groans out there if this is you. Okay, so I want you to think about, and it's a bit of a hard question, have you really been allocated adequate resources dedicated to your program? Do you have the appropriate level of time, money, or people? Or maybe you're not sure, because if you haven't done this before, or if you've done it but haven't actually costed it, you didn't log the amount of time that was required for the different aspects, you may not know. So can I suggest to you, whether you're starting this for the first time or whether you're doing it again, or whether you're partway through the process, can I suggest that you start from now to log your time, whether it's in your diary, a separate document, or some other way you have of actually keeping a record of the amount of time you spend on the mentoring program and what are you doing during that time, because this will help the people who come behind you, and this will help you if you have to apply for funds in future, or if your program grows, or if you want to roll out a different program. If you know, if you've tracked and you can estimate how much actual time you used or you think you will use, that will serve you well and allow you to make a good business case for getting the resources you need and the budget you need. So the fourth fatal flaw is inadequate support. So I don't know if you can see too well, but these little animals working together, I think that's beer they're getting out of the fridge, not teamwork. But the point is, it's an unlikely team that's been put together there, but they're working together well. They're supporting each other to get what they want and what they're going to share. So it's fairly traditional. The catch cry is we need support from the top. And I certainly agree with that. You need top-down support for your mentoring program to work. But sometimes I see mid-level management and supervisors actually left out of the loop. And believe you me, they can derail your mentoring program if they are not on board. And this is why you need a communication strategy that actually reaches people who may not be directly involved, but indirectly they could topple your tower. So keep them informed and keep them on board. Talk to them about why this is important, and not just to individuals. They're not just releasing people for the fun of it. They're releasing people perhaps to achieve strategic outcomes that they too are responsible for. Essentially, you need to market mentoring. You need to reinforce senior management's decision and keep the business case in front of mind and continually promote mentoring. So you need that two-way communication. You can see I've circled it on the diagram under promote mentoring here. The two-way communication, that means you're out there listening, asking questions and listening. You've got your ear to the ground. You're listening and hearing what people have to say about mentoring, and you're keeping them involved and informed and supportive. So as we move on, we need to look at preparing our participants. And it's a mistake to assume managers, or anyone else for that matter, knows how to mentor. The skill sets are different from management roles and different from traditional workplace roles. And mentors need to know their role. They need to know the boundaries and expectations. They need to develop specific communication skills and the facilitative and authoritative styles that make mentoring work. Those being mentored also need to know how to get the most out of the relationship. They need to put together a plan that they will drive in order to achieve their own goals for mentoring. So my ideal scenario for training mentors and mentorees, and I stress it is an ideal scenario, is 3 half days of workshops. Ideally, I like to get the mentors themselves for half a day by themselves and talk about the mentoring concept and process and styles and strategies, and actually have them experience a mentoring conversation for themselves. I also like to get the mentorees, the people being mentored, by themselves for a half a day and talk to them also about the concept and process of mentoring, how mentoring works, how they can get what they want and what their goals are for mentoring. And finally, in the ideal setting, we get matched pairs together and talk to them about roles and responsibilities, the sorts of things that can go wrong, what their expectations are of each other, and actually facilitate their first meeting in a supported environment in the workshop and get them to come up with their goals and agreements. Now, it's not always possible, obviously, in these days of people being in remote locations and different workplaces and scattered all around the country. But you can still get this content across using webinars such as the one I'm running today, online learning, e-courses, and other materials that supplement, complement, and in some cases can be used to replace face-to-face training, though that's not ideal. So think about what you can provide, but you certainly need to prepare your participants, both mentors and those being mentored, to get the most. So moving on to our 6th fatal flaw, the lack of structure and follow-up. If you put people together and say go forth and ment, some will, but many with good intentions will be clueless about what specifically they should be doing and how to go about it. Some need a step-by-step procedure to follow, and others need a more general guide for each mentoring meeting. They also need a method of tracking progress. In addition, the coordinator needs to personally follow up each participant or have some efficient way of checking that mentoring is in fact happening and both parties are satisfied. Most problems in a mentoring relationship can be solved with early recognition and action. All parties benefit from knowing someone is interested in them and available for assistance. Here are a few examples of support programs. So your individual follow-up can be face-to-face or web-based. You can provide a resource centre. It can be audio visuals, printed material, or it can be completely web-based, and that is growing in popularity where people can download or access audio visuals, download printed material, those sorts of things. Again, online communities, and several of my programs have built online communities where participants can come to interact with each other or interact with me or program coordinators, and within that they have their online resource centres. You can provide online tutorials. You might provide Mentor the Mentor, a newsletter or mentoring tips that are emailed out to participants on a regular basis, say weekly, fortnight, so every second week or every month. You can do a living library, which is a lovely concept where people can get together, perhaps in a physical library, but you set up and facilitate a process where people meet people and borrow them, take them out as though they were a library book, and take them out for a cup of coffee or tea or something, and actually listen to their story or ask them questions about a particular topic in which they are expert. You can do shadowing, where people actually are a silent shadow to a person for a day or a few hours, and they observe this person in their everyday work. And journaling, where people observe and reflect and write their reflections for personal insights. You can do group follow-up sessions, so bring people back together. A lot of my programs have an ongoing series of workshops around career development, or using an instrument like the Myers-Briggs type instrument or the Gallup Strengths Finder to help them identify their strengths and areas to develop. You can do lunch and learn, and again, this can be face-to-face or online through a webinar, where people bring a brown bag lunch and sit down and listen to an expert in a particular field, or perhaps a panel, and ask them questions. You can run webinars, workshops I've already talked about. You do refreshers, updates, related topics, or perhaps advanced skills. You might run networking events that are semi-social, that bring people together. You can run forums for questions and answers. And I always like to run a midpoint review and a final event. And that a midpoint review is particularly useful because halfway through a program, if you can get together with people again, online or face-to-face, check in with them, hear their success stories, get them to share those, and also hear their challenges and workshop those. Bringing the group back together to hear successes really motivates people. To hear challenges helps them brainstorm and hear from others who have overcome those challenges, but also hear and work out ways they can recover from those challenges or get around them. And what you'll find is this is a real boost. And if any participants have been sort of not getting very far with their mentoring relationships, it helps them get back on track. Those that are going well, it gives them an additional boost and a rev up, and those sort of somewhere in the middle, it kind of re-engages and revitalizes those participants. A final event is lovely to celebrate the wins, to recognise the participants. You can give them certificates if you want to. Some programs that are well funded give a small gift to mentors, and it allows people to have closure in the program. Of course, they may continue informally afterwards, but it's just nice to kind of round it off. So I want you to think about, again, what sort of follow-up you have. Do you have some follow-up already? Do you have an actual structured program, or do you not do very much? And I'd urge you to think about what you can do. This stuff doesn't have to cost a lot. I mean, if you've got funding and if you've got resources, great. But if you haven't, there are things that you can do that don't cost a lot of money, but actually give you a really good return. So the next fatal flaw was that monitoring and evaluating mentoring. And it's really important to stay in touch with participants throughout the program and monitor and see how things are going. You need a program coordinator. So you need someone who's the designated go-to person, a reference point for questions, the first port of call if participants are having difficulties. You also need ways of gaining regular feedback from the entire group of participants. I like to run a review session, as I've told you, at the midpoint to re-energize and reinforce the positive progress, and that final review that allows participants to share and celebrate success and provide closure and to gather information for your evaluation. So let's talk about evaluation. And you may have noticed in that 4P model that I put it right up front. You need to plan your evaluation right from the beginning. And here's the sort of things you want to evaluate. You're going to be evaluating the processes. So how did you recruit people? How did that go? Your selection process, your matching process, and that communication plan. So you evaluate that. You obviously want to evaluate the mentoring itself, the relationships. Were they maintained for the duration of the program? What was the quality? How satisfied were people with it? You also need to evaluate your program of support, the training, the materials, the resources, and the activities you provided to support people. And of course, you're going to evaluate the outcomes. Now, remember, in the first model I showed you, we looked at specifying objectives, and we talked about, well, identifying the outcomes of mentoring and how you would measure those. And you look at outcomes for mentorees, the people who are mentored, outcomes also for mentors. And often I have mentors tell me, I think I got as much out of that as the people I mentored. So don't forget to look at what outcomes there were for mentors and for your organisation. And this is why you're looking at the strategic value and the organisational needs at the beginning of your planning process, because you also want to see if you can find ways to measure them. One of the most popular way to evaluate is using a questionnaire. It shouldn't be your only method, and you can't rely totally on questionnaires, because I'm finding there's a lot of questionnaire fatigue out there. People are weary of doing surveys. I've actually gone away from technology in my questionnaires, and I give hard copy questionnaires to people in final sessions, and I don't let them leave until I get their questionnaire back, because this is one of the few ways you can guarantee a very high response rate. It's more difficult and time consuming and costly to collate a handwritten response, but it is worth it in terms of the data you get and the response rate. So this is an example. This is based on real objectives of a real program, and it's a way of turning what is essentially qualitative data, in that it's the response, the subjective opinion of your participant, but you can turn it into something that you can put numbers around. So in this particular program, if you read down the left-hand column, and this would be set up on a paper-based questionnaire as a tick the box response, one of a number of questions, and it will be one of the first questions I ask. To what extent do you agree that this program enabled mentorees to, and then down the left-hand side you can see, and these were the specified objectives. We wanted, these were graduates in this particular program. We wanted them to reflect on their career aspirations. We wanted them to take ownership of their own career development. We wanted them to set career-related goals, and we were hoping that some of them over the 12-month period would actually achieve some career-related goals. This question, and the way it's phrased, allows you to put the same question to both mentors and mentorees. To what extent do you agree that this program enabled mentorees too? So mentorees, graduates in this case, can talk about themselves, and mentors can talk about the mentorees. And we ask them to tick the box, strongly disagree on the left, disagree, not sure, agree, and strongly agree. And on the questionnaire, there would then be, apart from the tick the box response, there would be a comments section. So we ask them to make a comment about their responses. And so then by counting the ticks in the various boxes, when we collate all of the responses, I can then write a report that says, X% of graduates strongly agreed that the mentoring allowed them to reflect on their career aspirations. X% agreed or strongly agreed that they were able to take ownership of their career development, and so on. So this is a qualitative question that allows you to extract quantifiable data to read back. And it is quantifiable data as well as the qualitative comments that people make that will help you pitch a business case for your next mentoring program. Okay, so, and this is what I call the evaluation matrix. And again, I think I've prepared this as a more easy to read handout and a much more detailed handout, in fact, that you can download where you're watching this recording or from my website. If you have a problem, just send me an email and I can get that to you. So the evaluation matrix, as you're looking at the screen, looking down the columns on the left-hand side in green, you've got success indicators. Now, this would be something that you would generate. This is a starting point, but you use this in your planning process right up front. You might do it as a workshop or as a process with a planning group or a working committee. You look at success indicators. So for your program, what would indicate success? And as examples, I've presented to you here, participant objectives achieved. Sometimes what I do in planning a mentoring program, I get focus groups together, or perhaps even in the training, if we've got long enough together, I actually get the participants to brainstorm what outcomes they would like to achieve. Or you might have it on your application form or expression of interest. What do people want to get out of mentoring? And then you build that in as one of your success indicators. If you set up a website or a web page that is purely for participant use, you can monitor that, and that might be a measure of success. Partnerships maintained for the duration. So did they maintain their mentoring relationship? And so if you work across, you can see then in blue the data sources and in orange the methods. So participant objectives achieved. The data source is the participants themselves. How we might do that is a survey questionnaire at the end of the program. So I think that's something that you can kind of work through. This is a generic example and one that you could then use to guide your own planning and become much more specific and much more detailed. So 7 steps to success. I'm going to summarize for you now. So turning around those 7 fatal flaws into 7 steps to success. The first one, you need to build a business case for mentoring, regardless of your organisation or institution. It still has organisational needs and strategic value that mentoring must address, as well as the benefits for the people. You need to plan and you need to allow enough lead time to prepare for your mentoring program. You need to ensure that you have adequate resources. You need the time, the money, and the people to make mentoring work. And really your resources dictate the type of mentoring program you can afford. You can have a Rolls-Royce version or you can have one that's on a shoestring. But you do need some resources and you need to plan and work out where to get the most bang for your buck, if you like, how to be most cost effective in the resources that you actually have and what you can do with those. And I work with programs from the shoestring right up to the Rolls-Royce. You definitely need to plan two-way communication to promote the strategic and personal value to all of your stakeholders, a comprehensive communication plan that promotes mentoring, and it's non-stop before you even launch your program, right throughout the program and after the program. You definitely need to prepare your participants. You need to educate and inform mentors, mentorees, and their managers, and indeed all of the stakeholders. You need to provide structure and follow-up to your mentoring participants. And you need to monitor and evaluate the mentoring. There is an article that I've written that inspired this webinar called, funnily enough, 7 Fatal Flaws of Mentoring Programs and How to Avoid Them. And that's kind of a summary of what I've spoken about, a written summary, and you can download that. Do remember, as a result of participating in this webinar, you will have supplied your email to my friends at the Saskatchewan Polytechnic in Regina, and they are planning their interprofessional mentoring conference. So having supplied your email address, you will be on their mailing list and you'll receive news of that forthcoming conference. And I hope to see you there because I'll be speaking. In the meantime, do reach out to the Polytechnic. There are some groups there very interested in mentoring, and I'm sure that you can help each other out. You might also want to reach out to the International Mentoring Association, who are co-sponsors of that conference. I'm also a board member on IMA, and they have a wealth of resources for members there. So do stay in touch. Do reach out to the various networks that are now talking about mentoring. So before you go, I would like you to make sure that you get the most value out of time you've invested in listening to this recording by spending a few moments to jot down what have been your key takeaways. I covered 7 points in detail, but some of those probably stuck in your mind more than others. And if you've been taking some notes, perhaps you've already got your key takeaways written down. What I also recommend you do is write down 1, 2, or 3 actions that you will take. So what will you do as a result? It's all too easy to listen and watch to a presentation and think, oh yes, that was good, I got something out of that. But unless you actually write down some actions and then get them onto your to-do list or in your diary, then perhaps you don't get the full value. Again, if you have questions, reach out to those networks right there in Canada and North America, or drop me an email and I'll do my best to be of assistance. So I guess that's the end of the webinar. I did make a recording of the live one, but we had some technical issues that meant that the visuals weren't available. So I'm hoping that this has served the purpose. The audio is still there if you want to go through that, and there were some questions that I answered on the live video that you might want to touch base on. So this is Anne Rolfe of Mentoring Works calling it quits for today, and I hope that this has been of value to you. Thank you and goodbye.